Hi everybody, welcome to Experiments in Crafting. I'm Maggie. Today I'm going to be showing you how to block this acrylic cowl. Cowls can be a little bit tricky to block because they're a loop, and when you go to lay them out it's tricky to try and get both sides laid down, so I'm going to show you a couple of tricks for that. In addition, this is acrylic, so acrylic's not really known for how well it blocks, so I'm going to show you a couple of things, couple of tricks just with that too. This pattern here is the Enchanted Rose Cowl by Rachie Newen Designs. I used Loops and Threads Joy Decay for this project. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first step to blocking is to soak your project in like room temperature water, sort of just lukewarm. And I'm going to add a little bit of soak, which is a no rinse soap. So add a little bit of that, swirl it around, and I'm just going to press it down. Try not to disturb the project too much when you're soaking it, because that can cause a bunch of the fiber to get loose and really start to fuzz up. So I'm just pressing lightly with my hands, but I'm not stirring or swirling or doing anything like that. I usually like to let wool soak for about 15 minutes, but for acrylic, it's really not going to soak up much water because acrylic is really just plastic. So I'm just going to sort of just leave it sit here. If you guys have any crochet related questions, I'll also take any of those on any topic and try and answer those throughout the stream. So I'm just going to leave these for a minute just to soak up a little bit more water. One of the things that you can do when you're blocking a cowl is to try and find a pillow or a even like a comforter rolled up into a ball. So I have a pillow off the end of the couch, and it was a good fit for this cowl. So I'm going to use that to block, I think, for tonight. You can, of course, lay the cowl flat and block it flat, but you have to be able to block both layers at the same time. So I'm going to block onto something round, and I think that will work out just a little bit better for this project. All right, I think that's really about as much as this is going to take on. So I am going to lay out my towel. And when you block, you shouldn't wring your project out because it will stretch in ways that you don't really want it to stretch. So I'm going to just squeeze as much water out as I can. And then I'm going to lay it flat in the middle of my towel and roll it up. Set my water aside here. And then I roll it the other direction. And then press it just really as hard as you can to try and get as much of the water out so that it dries a little bit faster for you. A lot of times I really like to kind of squeeze it out. So, all right. And then just set my towel aside. There was a cricket in my towel, I think.
I thought it was a spider.
No, it was a cricket. See if I can shoo him away. Oh, he left. Alright. So, if I was going to block this flat, I would have to very carefully unroll these edges and pin them flat. So I'll just show you what that would look like if I was going to try and block this flat. So, being very careful to grab and line these up back here. And I can probably show you a little bit better on this front edge here. So you have to unroll and then pin together through both layers. And so it's unroll and pin all the way down. And this will work. You can just work your way down.
Keep in mind that you're facing straight down.
Yeah.
So like for the mic.
So this will work. You just have to keep unrolling and making sure that everything is nice and even and squared up. And then you can see one of the things that I'm trying to deal with this cowl is that my solid sections are wider than my crisscross sections. And so what I'm hoping is blocking will help even this out a little bit. It's not going to be perfect because this is acrylic and it's not going to hold absolutely the way that I would like it to. But I can even some of this out with pinning and try and pin nice straight edges. So I can just keep working along the edges and pinning along the sides. And this will work. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that you have a double layer here. And so when you come back to check this, your top layer may have dried overnight, but your bottom layer might still be wet because it's really not getting any air circulation. So at that point, you kind of have to decide whether you flip it and repin it, or whether you maybe use a fan and try and get a little bit more air circulation going. You've got some options. You can just leave it for another day or so and try and get it to dry like fully. So acrylic shouldn't take that long to dry because, again, it's not soaking up the water because the fiber is just plastic, but it will hold on to it for a little while. So this is option number 1 for blocking. Just block it to your regular blocking mats, pin it, make sure that you get both layers and work very carefully. Your other option, I'm going to pull all my pins back out. Your other option is to pin to something round. So in this case, I found a pillow that fits pretty well to the size I need it to be. You could also use a comforter rolled up, other pillows just of different sizes depending on the size of your cowl. If you're using a really long one, like more like an infinity scarf, you might not have a pillow large enough to block to. So rolling up like a big bedspread or a comforter might do a better job for you. So I'm going to position this on here, and then I'm going to pin as evenly as I can all the way around and try and get this edge, which really wants to curl up on me, to stop curling so badly. I think the combination of this particular stitch pattern and the acrylic yarn just really made for a project that wanted to curl. So I'm just going to go through and pin this all the way around. And again, if anyone has any questions about blocking, about crochet in general, about this yarn, anything, go ahead and leave those in the comment section, or not the comment section, but the chat for this live stream. And I can answer those as we go. And of course, if you're watching this video after we're not live, you can leave comments in the comment section. And I will do my best to answer those too. So what I'm hoping is that because this pillow was a nice fit for the solid sections, that these crisscross sections are going to stretch just a little bit as they dry. And that will sort of do the vertical blocking for me. So I won't have to pin the vertical direction. So I'm just going to keep working all the way around this pillow. One of the bonuses to working on a pillow is that when I'm done, I can stand it up and prop it against a wall or, you know, whatever, and just leave it dry, and it can get airflow from all directions. Obviously, it's not going to get airflow from the center because the pillow is blocking it, but see, I have a hello from a couple of people. Welcome to the stream. I'm glad you've made it. Alright, I'm going to turn this around and do this other side. This is kind of a different cowl shape. It's a real narrow one that's meant to be worn real scrunched up. So I'm planning on giving this to about a 6-year-old girl. Well, it'll be for her 7th birthday, actually. So I think it'll be large enough, like, vertically that she can pull it around and use it as a hood if she wants. So I think it'll be a really cool design, and then it's good kid colors. The Joy DK yarns came in a lot of fun colors, but they had a lot of nice palettes that work together really well. And so these worked, and I like the colors. They're good kid-friendly colors, so. Alright, and I just keep rotating. It's beginning to look a bit like a pin cushion. And I just got to keep pulling and evening things out. But this is working really well because this is a really nice fit for this cowl. Kind of lucked out size-wise, and that I had a pillow that was basically the perfect size. I do have one more shawl to block tonight, and I'm not sure if I'll do that on stream or if I'll just post pictures later, but I do try to block multiple things at a time. One, because I'm already down here and I've got my mats ready to go and cleaned off and I've got my pins out, but also this soap is not terribly inexpensive, you know what I mean? It's a little pricey, and if I've already got water ready and the soap in the water, I might as well block a handful of things at a time. So I think I'm going to go ahead and block that cowl, or the shawl tonight too. So I'm just about done pinning. I pinned pretty evenly all the way around, and I think I'm pretty happy with how it's stretching along the edges here. This is really the time where I sit and I check and make sure that things are looking how I like. If I wanted this pattern to open up a little bit more in here, you could add more pins along the center. So don't be afraid to block in extra spots. I did have a shawl recently that I made that was a leaf pattern, and the leaves towards the center, I was having a really hard time stretching from the outside. And so what I did was I just blocked all the way from the center and worked all the way out, and I had pins all through the center. And so typically I like to block along the top edge of a triangle shaped cowl or a triangle shaped shawl, and then pull and just block along the outside edge. But sometimes you can't do that. You just have a pattern that really needs more help, or you've made a really large pattern and it just weighs too much and you're stretching the ends out and you're not getting the openness you were hoping for towards the middle. And so you can just start throwing pins in the center and pulling from the center and working your way to the outside so that you get nice even blocking. But as for this cowl, I'm pretty happy with how this is going. If you want to see how this turns out, I'm definitely going to post some pictures of this on Instagram and on Facebook. If you're not already following me on Facebook and Instagram, you can find me at Experiments in Crafting on both of those websites. And of course, if you found this stream and you're not already a subscriber to me on YouTube, go ahead and hit subscribe, and that would be very much appreciated. So, if you guys have any questions about blocking or about anything crochet related, go ahead and ask me those now in the chat section. And I'd love to take a few questions and see if I can help you out with your current projects, or maybe give you an idea of, you know, some ideas on blocking. But yeah. Trying to remember where I left that shawl that I was going to block. I could get that soaking too. I'll wait for anybody who has any questions. Got a new viewer. Welcome. Just been working on blocking this cowl and taking any crochet questions that anyone has.
Do you need me to switch away for a second, or what?
Just put it on there. I will step away. I'll be right back. I know where that cowl or that shawl is, and it is right at the top of the stairs. Alright, so I'm back. This is the shawl that I'm going to be working on, blocking as well tonight. This is yarn by Twisted Fiber Art. It's their Glamour Evolutions line. And the shawl is called... I'm having a hard time remembering the name of the pattern, but when I post this on Instagram, I'll definitely have it available so you can see what it is. It's something like geometric shawl. It was a really interesting pattern. They had the sample at the last yarn show that I was at, and so I really wanted to make it. I love the glittery yarn and this really pretty gradient. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this in the water and let it start soaking. One of the nice things about blocking acrylic first is that it almost never bleeds any dye because it's not really dyed per se. So I'm going to pop this in the water, and the water's still pretty clean and I don't have to worry about dye transfer. Someone's asking about block laying on a towel after hand washing. You don't have to pin when you block, but I like to pin when I block because it stretches it into the shape that I want it. So if it's something that doesn't really need a ton of stretching out, so if you've made, let's say you've made a scarf and it's pretty even and it looks pretty good to you, you can just hand wash it and lay it out, and if it's not curling up or doing anything weird, you can go ahead and just let it air dry. But if you're noticing that it's curling, or if it has a pattern that needs to be opened up, if you've got a little bit of waviness going to your edges and you want to try and even that out, pinning can definitely help. And you can pin to a couple of layers of towels. You can pin, some people block directly to a mattress. Like if you have a spare bedroom, you could just take the sheets off and pin right to the mattress. Some people block, if you've got pretty decent carpet backing, like carpet padding, you can block right to your carpeting, because there's sort of some foam in there and you can just pin right to that. I block on mats from Harbor Freight, which is a hardware store. These are like anti-fatigue mats for like a garage or a shop. But these are super cheap and pretty easy to come by at most hardware stores. So I use these, and I've got a pretty big space down here in my basement, and I can just pin all over the place and use, I can get probably, at this point, I can probably get about 6 shawls blocking at the same time. I don't usually have 6 waiting to be blocked, but around Christmas, it can get a little hectic. So I'm going to set this cowl aside. If anyone has any questions about this, I can bring it back over and show you how that's going. But I'm going to go ahead and start blocking this shawl and taking any more questions if anyone has any. Let's see. So you have a shawl that's made of cotton and curls slightly at the bottom. I think it would be worth going ahead and pinning that. And that part of that is because the cotton will take a block a little bit because it's a natural fiber. So get it wet in sort of room temperature water. If you've got like a soap, I use soak. You can use a little bit of hair conditioner if you want. Just a real small amount to soften the cotton up if you feel like it needs it. Put that in your water, let it soak for about 15 minutes. Pull it out, squeeze as much water out of it as you can. Then I usually roll mine up in a towel and dry it out, and then lay it out and pin it in the shape that you want it, and when it dries, it should hold. When you wash it again, so if you wear it a few times and you want to wash it again, and you should be able to get away with just hand washing and laying it back out to dry. If you notice it starts curling back up on you, you might want to pin it again every time you wash it. And I know that's kind of a lot of work, but it can be worth it for it to really look nice when you're wearing it. All right. Just swirl this around a little bit. Again, I'm trying not to bother it too much, because if you bother your projects too much, they're going to fuzz up on you and felt a little bit. But I do like to squeeze out any air in the fiber and replace it with water so it really gets good and wet. And you can see this is hand-dyed yarn, and it is starting to dye the water in the bowl. So it's getting pretty blue. So yeah, it's starting to get pretty blue. That happens with hand-dyed yarn. There's just no way to get every last little bit of dye out of the project, or out of the yarn when they sell it. So if you're going to be blocking hand-dyed yarn, certainly expect that you're going to have some dye come off of the yarn, at least a little bit. I don't ever block in clothes that I can't get a little bit of dye on. no white t-shirts to block hand-dyed yarn. I've never had any of the dye transfer, but I also don't want to take the chance. Yeah, and cotton polyester blend shawl should block just fine. As long as it's got a little bit of natural fiber, it should block pretty well. This cowl that I'm blocking over here is 100% acrylic, and I still think it's worth blocking, at least trying it out and seeing if I can even some of the stitches out. I think blocking any fiber is worth it at least a little bit, especially when you're talking about crochet. So in this project, because I have these crisscross stitches, there's spots where the stitches can get caught on each other and they might be bunched up a little bit, and blocking is just going to help them find their spot and really work out so that you can really see the pattern. It might not stay that way, but it's worth at least giving it a try and pulling those stitches to where they belong. I think it's especially important to block anything that has a lot of chains and spaces where you've worked across chains. And that's this shawl over here has tons of chain spaces and then spots where I've worked into the chain space, and so the stitches can be sort of all over the place. And when I go to block this, you'll see that it really is going to open up and all those stitches are going to pop into place. Alright, so this has been in the water long enough, and I'm going to go ahead and squeeze it out. Again, being careful not to wring it, and being careful not to mess with it too much so that it starts fuzzing up. Set that on my towel. Set my bowl of what's pretty blue water, you can see at this point. I see a few of you are commenting. You certainly can use a spray bottle. I know a lot of people who spray block instead of wet blocking. So what I'm doing tonight is called wet blocking. And I know a lot of people who prefer to spray block. I really just like wet blocking better. It just works better for me. I have tried spray blocking. And really the only benefit that I've found is that it does dry a little bit faster. And so if I'm on a time crunch and I'm worried that it's not going to finish, for example, that shawl that I was talking about earlier where I had made it and it was the leaf pattern, I did spray block it because I finished it the night before a wedding and I needed it ready for the next day because it was a gift. So I did go ahead and spray block that, and it really wasn't any easier for me, honestly. I just prefer to wet block. Alright. So, this shawl is a triangle shape, and so what I usually like to do when I block triangle shapes is start by blocking all the way along the top edge, as straight as I can get it, and then pulling from the bottom edge. And so I'm actually going to turn this around because I want to pull towards me. So yeah, I see somebody mentioning that you don't have quite as much room. I do have a pretty large space in the basement that I have available, and my mats are just down as flooring, so I can kind of work wherever I want to, just sort of in the middle of the floor. So if you're limited on space, like I said, I know people use mattresses, so if you have a spare bedroom that you can pull the sheets off of a mattress, like a full or queen size mattress is a pretty big space to be able to block. You can use just carpeting in the middle of the floor. There are options. If you don't have a space that you can leave set up, like I do, just in my basement, you can also get some of these mats and put them down, block, and pick them back up. So they're a temporary inconvenience at least, and not something permanently in your way. But spray blocking is a better option. If you really are tight on space, you can spray block a small section at a time. So, for example, I could block this corner of the shawl, spray block it, unpin it, and move down the shawl and keep going. It's a little bit more work and it's a little less ideal, but it gets the job done and it still gets you a nice project and it works with the space that you have. So I'm just putting my pins in. I put them in pretty tight because when I start pulling, I don't want curvy parts. So I want this to be pretty close to straight when I start pulling. So I'm just working my way down the line, trying to keep it as straight as possible. And keeping in mind the shape of the shawl and how it's constructed. So I want to pull this up to there, I know. And I still want this to be nice and even. Okay. Now, when I do a shawl like this, a lot of times what I want to do is pull from the top and get it to open up and sort of get an idea of how open this pattern will go. And then I like to pull from the bottom corner and again sort of get an idea of how far this will go. And I'm having a little bit of trouble at my corners. They want to come around to the bottom side. And so I may pull those pins out for right now and see if I can get this to open up just a little bit more. Pull this corner out. And then if I stretch this, I'm getting a lot more play in this shawl. So I'm going to do that. And I'll deal with those corners in a minute. So this has a nice loopy edging, and so I am going to just put one pin in every loop, and that seems excessive, but if I put them in any loops they're gonna stand out and be kind of pointy, and so if I skip them they're not gonna be pointy and they're gonna be sort of unbalanced. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put one in every loop. Again, this might get into an area where you're limited on supplies. You might not have as many pins, might not have as much space. So just work with what you've got. So if you don't have as many pins, pin a small section and spray block it and come back and pin a new section. Because I use so many pins for that cowl, I think I'm going to end up having to dip into the pins that I don't like, which are these green and blue pins. And they're going to be particularly difficult with this shawl because they're just going to disappear right in to the yarn. So I'm going to have to be careful with those that I get them all pulled when I am done blocking the shawl. somebody's asking why do I soak them first. It's just my preference. I learned to wet block. Spray blocking is fine. And again, I know, you know, pattern designers and people who just spray block. So that's fine. I just prefer to soak mine and block them entirely wet. So it's really preference from crocheter to crocheter. And I'm really not liking how this is blocking right now. So I'm actually going to pull all my pins out. I don't know if you can see here. It's making it spiky, but because this edging is so tight and so loopy, it's going to look like a starburst, and that's not really the feel I want on this shawl. So I'm going to pull all my pins out of this side, and I'm going to move them in so that they're on. So I'm just going to pull those back so that those relax. I'm going to move them in along the straight edge so that this stays straighter and this edging doesn't get so spiky. So I'm going to pull that back and just pin. I try to pin evenly. So if I pin here, I want to pin here on a triangle shawl. That way it stretches pretty evenly. If you start pinning all one side, then when you go to pin this side, you run into problems of stretching it too far. So if you pin evenly, so I'm going to pin this side, and then find the same row and pin it to about the same height. That way it stretches pretty evenly. One of the things I can say about wet blocking is I've found that I can stretch it a little bit more than if I am spray blocking. So if you have something that you really want to open up, you might want to try wet blocking. But again, you can always stay with spray blocking. It works just fine. So, okay, and again, just going to find my spaces. And I'm really pushing this yarn to its limits here. I'm going to ease it up just a little bit so that it doesn't do any damage. I'm just going to keep working up the shawl, trying to pin evenly on both sides. Okay. It's not. So yeah, in this case, I'm gonna pin inside the edging. Normally I would pin on the edging, but I just was not liking how it was turning out. So these pins I'm gonna place inside along the straight edge. And what I like to do is I go through and I get a rough shape, and I keep moving my pins until I've got a nice straight line, pretty rough shape of how I want it to be, and then I can go in and fill more pins in where I'm seeing spots that are bowing, or so like if I pull this one out, it's going to bow in just a little bit, and I can just grab it with a pin and pull it out. So just going to work along this edge here, and I'm having a little bit of trouble with this corner here. It's not wanting to block exactly the way I would have expected. I may have to release my whole top edge and let it sort of take, I'm going to sort of relax this and curve it just a little bit. so that I still have a triangle shape, but with a little bit curvier edges. This shawl is just a little bit tight, and it doesn't want to block in a perfect triangle. So the edges are just a little tighter than I would have liked. It's really up to you as the crocheter to decide where you want your pins to go. If you want to block along the edging and you like how that looks, go for it. If you want to block inside the edging, you can do that too. Alright, I'm going to move over to the other side. And again, I'm going to release these top pins. Get my feet wet. So, blocking is just something that takes some time and practice to really get what you want. A lot of times if I'm not actually streaming blocking, I will just turn on Netflix and sit and take my time and really make sure I'm happy with how it's turning out. So you can see, I think we're up at this edge here. So seeing the edge here of...
You can move the light.
Huh?
You move the light leg.
Yeah, I might have to just move this light a little bit. Got some extra lighting for the live stream, but it's on my blocking mat. So you can see this is that corner that's not cooperating. It wants to curve just a little bit, and sometimes that happens and you just got to work with it. So instead of this being a nice straight line up here, I'm going to let it curve around a little bit. And again, I just go in and I fill in any spots where there's more or less curving that I would have liked. If you want to come down here a bit. Alright, so on this edge, I'm starting to see curves between my pins, which means there's too much space between my pins. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick a few more pins in and even out those curves so I don't have that happening. And then I just like to step back and look and see how each side looks next to the other. So this side I've got curved a little bit more than the side over here. So I'm going to relax some of these pins and just adjust it so that the sides are mirrored. Relax a few pins out of here where there's spots where it's pulling. All right. And then, yeah, I just go along the edge and make sure that there aren't spots that are bowing too much or pulling, and just work around. So the important thing here is that the pattern has opened way up, and that was one of the goals of blocking this, was to really get this pattern to show up. Before it was pretty squished down tight, and you couldn't really see this kind of hexagon pattern that it's got going on here. So that was really the goal of the whole thing, and I think we've achieved that. The top edge is not exactly the way I pictured, but it's working pretty well for this. Generally when I make a triangle shawl, it's wider along the top than it is along the sides. And this shawl looks like that's probably not the case. It looks like it didn't grow outward as fast as it should have. So that's just a design feature of the pattern itself. It's going to wear a little bit funny because it's not going to really be wide enough to wrap around my neck and wear as like a triangle cowl or triangle shawl with the point forward. So it'll be interesting to see how this one actually looks on. And again, if you want to see how this turns out once it's all dry and taken off the mats and on a mannequin or on me, go ahead and follow me on Instagram or on Facebook. The pictures will be available on both. And you can find me at Experiments in Crafting on both of those venues. Let's see. Somebody's asking about heat blocking. I imagine what you mean is steam blocking with an iron. And steam blocking makes me nervous just because you get heat involved, and especially with this particular yarn, there is metallic bits in here, and I don't know what those are made of. They say they're metal, but I doubt that they're metal shavings, so they're probably something plasticky, and I would probably keep heat away from this, especially since this was a relatively expensive hand-dyed yarn. I wouldn't want to risk putting an iron anywhere near it. And I know with steam blocking, you don't actually put the iron to the yarn. You hover it over and, you know, spray the steam with the steam setting. But I think, at least for this yarn, I would stay away from it. I may try steam blocking some cotton. If you were making a doily or something decorative like that and you were using crochet thread, that might be a good place for steam blocking because cotton can be a little bit tougher and doesn't have that risk of damage. But at least with this, especially with the metallic bits, I would not steam block this personally. But again, very good question. There's a handful of different ways that you can block. Spray blocking, wet blocking, steam blocking are the top three that I know of. And then you really have an open range of ways that you can do that in each technique. You know, you can work on blocking mats, you can work on a mattress, on the carpet, just pin it to, you can even use an ironing board and just pin it to your ironing board cover. So whatever materials you have, whatever resources you have at your availability, use whatever. I mean, obviously we used a pillow for this one, and so if you had limited space, a pillow is great. You can just block a section and unpin it and block another section if you've got a larger project. Or in this case, I did the whole cowl on the pillow and it's blocking, and I'm just going to prop it up against, actually I'm probably really just going to leave it here and leave it propped up, and airflow will be able to get to all sides, and hopefully it'll dry nice and evenly, and I'll be able to pull my pins out and slide it off and be able to gift it to a little girl who I think is going to really like it. So if there are no, if anyone has any questions about blocking or about crochet in general, I'll go ahead and wait a couple of minutes and see if you want to post those. Otherwise, probably wrap up tonight. So, yeah. So it looks like the links to the Instagram and Facebook are there. Can you block Lion Brand landscapes? Okay. I haven't made anything with Lion Brand landscapes, but I have worked with Red Heart Boutique Unforgettable, and they're basically the same yarn. They're that real soft spun yarn that have a lot of fuzz to them. I did block a Red Heart Boutique scarf, and I felt like it was not as soft when I was done blocking it. The water really opened that yarn up. It blocked fine. It really looked a lot better when I was done blocking it, but I don't think it felt as nice when I was done blocking it. So I would maybe recommend treading carefully on blocking. I have heard some people say that you can kill it, which means using a steam iron and causing some of those acrylic fibers to sort of shrivel up. And apparently that's supposed to work really well. It works very similar to if you're familiar with using like ribbon, and then you take a flame to the edge and you sort of seal it off. You can use a steam iron and hold it real close but not touch it and steam across it like we were talking with steam blocking. But when you do it over acrylic, you can kill the fiber, and supposedly that's supposed to help a little bit. I have not tried that. You'd probably have to look around and see if anyone has some more recommendations on that. My best recommendation would be to use some really good hair conditioner and throw that into the water and try and soften that fiber up a little bit if you're going to block it, and touch it as little as possible. Put it in the water, take it out, wring it out with as little hand motion as possible, and lay it out and dry it. I don't even know that I would roll it in a towel and squeeze the fiber out, because you're going to disturb those fibers more and more. So I think I would just lay it out, pin it, try and touch it as little as possible, and really not open those fibers up, because those individually are what are going to touch your skin and keep poking you. Let's see. Okay, so somebody's mentioning just blocking outside in the sun, and that's a great idea. Get outside and just enjoy the day, but also your shawl is going to block really fast, especially because I think she also mentioned that she spray blocks, so it's really going to be drying probably about as fast as you're spraying it. So yeah, that's a great way to go ahead and block whatever you're working on, especially if you know, can do that. So all right. Alright, well, I think I'm going to wrap up for the evening, but if you guys have any more questions, go ahead and leave those in the comment section below. Or again, find me on Facebook, find me on Instagram, ask me as many questions as you want there. Thank you all for watching and participating and asking great questions and leaving great feedback. I really like this live format, and so I'm hoping you guys are enjoying it. Leave me some feedback if you're liking the live streams or if you prefer the edited video format. All of that helps me out and helps me make video content for you guys. So, thank you for watching. Have a great night. Bye.